Da da da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And outside, oh my goodness, we are in the mix of it for sure. We hit 45 with humidix today. Super hot. One more day. Tomorrow it was supposed to cool off, but you know the Weather Channel, right? Things are constantly changing. I just looked out my window. I opened up the curtains for the first time today, just blocking that sun out of my apartment. And I don't get a lot of sun. I get the morning sun, and then once that goes overhead, I don't see the sun again. A little bit, I can see the beautiful sunset sometimes. But I opened up the curtains. I thought, okay, that's enough of the dreary, enough of the heat, right? We know how the temperature can bring us down. And, I'm just totally amazed that people live in some of these really hot countries like Australia and Africa. Oh my goodness. Those are not my countries. But to be honest, if you take a look at what El Nino, how it is affecting the world this year, that you can actually see it doesn't really matter where you're living, right? You're going to get an experience. And it doesn't mean that a Nino means that it's going to be super hot. What it means is the weather is going to be unpredictable, right? That it's going to be unpredictable. It's going to be up and down and storms and yeah, and it affects us. I believe that it affects us emotionally. I had a hard time getting up. Finally, I said this afternoon, I said, Cindy, you got to get out of the house. And my brain was saying, no, Cindy, you don't have to get out of the house today. And I said, yes. So I looked at my little bookshelf behind me and grabbed a few books for the little library. And I walked to the drugstore to take my blood pressure. My blood pressure was so good. 114 over 48. I have not had a blood pressure like that since I was like 14 years old myself. I was actually in shock. I thought, oh my goodness, is that really too low? Right? But I'm trying to keep track so that when I do go for my doctor's appointment, when I go in for a review and see how things are going, she was contemplating that I should be going on the high blood pressure pills. But if taking these iron supplements is going to do the trick for me, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm going to do whatever my doctor tells me to do. But I can't imagine if my blood pressure is normal that I'm going to need to get on the blood pressure pills. It's quite possible it was the fact that I have been I have been kind of deficient in taking my iron. Hello, Tammy. Did you take the truck out today for a drive? Did it run good for you? I hope you have no more repairs this summer at the very least. You put a lot of money into that truck in the past few months. And, I don't want to see you getting stuck out on the freeway or out in the countryside with no one to help, right? Another reason why we should think to take care, of how we feel about this age of AI learning, that we have this opportunity now to even have satellite internet that on our phones, that no matter where we are, we can connect, right? Here in Canada, we can connect to the police and the fire department and those emergency services on our phone, no matter where we are in the country. We might not get the internet, especially if we don't have that satellite internet, but I suspect that I'm going to be getting on it pretty soon, right? I'm going to be getting on it pretty soon. I'm trying to stay up with the technology in that movement forward. I do not want to be left behind, right? I don't want to be left behind. And of course, working in social media, working in some of those aspects that I am, that I need my PC. I need my laptop. I need my cameras. I need my phone, right? In order to do what I want to do. I'm hoping in the next week or two I'm going to get a new tripod for my camera so that I can take it with me. I had a few tripods, but I think I sold them in a yard sale or something silly me. The only one I kept was a little short one, which is only good basically for sitting on logs or to wrap around a tree stem or to sit on the kitchen table. So a nice one that raises up like 4 feet, that would make me perfectly happy. But I was happy that I did get out of the house. But oh my goodness, everybody out there is struggling. And you know how I can tell that everybody is struggling? It was like a ghost town today. Right? Nobody walking out and about. Nobody is. Everybody is sitting in the air conditioner. And that's why I had to give myself a little bit of a kick in the bum to say, okay, Cindy, time for some fresh air. But as soon as I went out there, I went, oh. And then when I saw my blood pressure, I was so surprised that because I thought, like, oh my goodness, I'm just so dizzy from all this heat. My blood pressure must be going through the roof right now. Why are you even taking your blood pressure? And well, they have these machines in the drugstores, and those are the ones that I'm using. But I have an app that keeps track, right? So I'm just going to keep track till I see my doctor again so that she can see actually how I'm kind of bouncing around up and down. I still am. I went to the drugstore yesterday and took my blood pressure and I was at 160. So and today I was at 114. And I didn't exert myself any more yesterday than I did today. So it is, I guess, I don't know. Maybe it was the heat that brought my blood pressure down, but I'm gonna count it as a good sign. That's awesome, Cindy, with your blood pressure. I thought it was awesome, but I was gonna just wait to get your opinion on that, right? Because I'm not somebody who pays attention. I'm only looking at the chart when I take on the machine. When I'm taking it, it tells me where I am in that range. And it says anything over 140 is considered high. And I went, oh my goodness, I'm at 114. I must be doing pretty good. And then the other one was anything over 70 in the solistics, I think they call it. And it was 70, and I was at like 48. And I went, oh my goodness, Cindy, those iron pills are doing good. In actuality, I have a gentleman that I do follow, and he does breath work, right? So he does the meditations too. But because I'm a contemplator, I'm usually hanging out with him for the breath work, right? And he has all these neat routines that you do, and he talks us through them, and we do all these, they kind of like those Eskimo music, the way they sing the Eskimo. Oh, you can't say Eskimos, right? That is not politically correct anymore. Yeah, it's Inuit. They like to be called Inuit. And the reason they don't like that name Eskimo is because the word Eskimo means man who eats raw fish. That's what it means. And they take it as an insult. And of course, it wasn't a name that they gave themselves. It was, right? It was the explorers that gave them that name. So they want to be called Inuit. So in respect, I have to kind of remember remember that when I'm talking about them. Okay, let me come down here. Yes, Cindy. Thank God the truck is running good once again with a new starter. I got the truck fixed yesterday. Really good. I hope you didn't get stuck though, Tammy, when you recognized that the starter wasn't going good. I understand what a starter when it doesn't work good, how it reacts because I used to be the queen of beaters. My last three cars were newer cars, right? One of them was brand new. The other two were fairly new, right? But before that, all through my 20s, I was the queen of beaters. And I know what a starter is like when your car is just going click, click, click when you're trying to start her up. Because there's only two things that it could be, the battery or the starter, right? Yeah. Oh, you did get stuck. Well, I'm glad you got some help, Tammy. I'm glad you got some help. There's nothing like getting stuck out in the countryside or getting stuck out on the highway. And and funny that I say that because that's happened to me so many times. We have an organization here called CAA. It's kind of a car rescue when you have emergencies. You need a battery. You got a flat tire. You need a tow home. And I used to pay because I was the queen of beaters, and it wasn't very much money. It was like I don't know, $10 or $15 a month to join this organization, and I used them all the time. I always got my money's worth out of those memberships. But I remember one time in the winter time, I went exploring. That video might be up there, Tammy. It's going to be a winter video, and I probably put a title to it like I got stuck in the snow or something like that, right? But we were driving the back country roads, and I was with a friend of mine when I first started up. I was making YouTube videos, urban exploring, and it didn't matter what the weather was. I was all put on some snow pants and a winter jacket, and off we went, right? And we went about, oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours away, and I was going down this old country road, and the snow was all over the place, right? The only reason that you could tell that it was a road because some truck went and drove down it and kind of packed down the snow. And I just went straight when I was supposed to turn a corner, and I drove right out into a farm field. And as soon as I recognized I was in a farm field, silly me, instead of just turning and going back to the road, I stopped. And when I stopped, my tires spun in the snow. I tried for about 20 minutes and then I said, oh, I got CAA, right? And I phoned the nearest town. Um, that was in the area of mine, and they patched me through to CAA, and then they sent somebody from the little town that I had called out to come and rescue us. But they wouldn't even come out to the field. They wouldn't even come out to the field. I had to traipse through the field back onto the road, grab the chain and hook, and then walk back to the car and hook it to my vehicle. And then they pulled me from the road, right? You would think that was the last time I did that. But no, I got stuck again. This time I was by myself again. Those winter explorers looking for abandons, right? Things were a little bit more solid because everything freezes up in the wintertime. So you had less chance of falling through floors, right? If you're by yourself, you got to kind of be careful, right? And I drove down this road, And I was driving, and I must have driven for about an hour and didn't see one house. And it was starting to get dark. And then I was driving down this road, and finally I saw some lights, and oh, great. And then again, the same idea. I saw that I was driving in somebody's driveway. That an hour, I was driving down this road for an hour. There was only one house, right? And it was like an hour away. And I drove down this road, noticed that it was somebody's driveway. And instead of driving in, because it was a farm and there was places, I guess the cows were roaming around, so it was pretty down packed, I should have just driven right into their I don't know, their house area, right? And turned around and just gone right back on the road. But silly me, I decide I'm going to turn on that one. And it was the reason why I didn't turn beforehand, because there was only enough room for one vehicle. I was just praying that nobody was going to come towards me, that I would have to pull to the side. But silly me, as soon as I noticed that house, I turned around and I got stuck right there. I had shovels with me. It was 40 below zero. It was getting dark. And I said, well, if I can't get my vehicle out, maybe once it gets dark, maybe I'll see some lights in the background, right? But I decided to walk down to this house, and I walked down to the house and knocked on the door, banged on the door. Nobody was there. It was just me and the cows, right? Burst into tears, went and trudged back to the car, got out my shovel. I had my snow pants and gear with me, and I tried to shovel my way out. There was nothing I could do. I was there for the night. I actually thought that maybe it was a house that wasn't being lived in, that they were only had the house there, but they were using the farm for their cattle. So they probably weren't even going to come by or anything. And it started getting dark. And to me, it looked like they're right. They had curtains up, but it kind of looked like I could see light through the curtains. And I said, "Oh, try one more time." But nobody came down the road with me, right? And I went down to the house and I banged on the door. A lady opened up the door right away. She opened up the door, and I burst into tears, like just the relief of it. And I burst into tears. And she's going, come in, it's cold outside, right? And she was like, oh, for sure she was in her 80s, because I remember her husband saying he was in his late 80s, right? And I told him what happened. I says, my car is up on the top of the road. And he says, well, let's go and try and get your vehicle out of there. Unless you want to wait until morning, you can stay here, right? And I don't know why I said, no, I got to get home, right? But because I didn't want to drive on that road in the dark. And he says, okay, well, follow me. We'll go to the barn and we'll get the tractor, and we'll see if we can pull you out. He was so old. He walked so slowly, right? But I was so grateful. His wife was inside and making coffee and sandwiches and stuff for me. We went out to the garage, and oh my goodness, his garage was like an antique store. He had all his mother's and grandmother's furniture in there, and pictures and bicycles and old steam engines. And I just wandered around in there for like 45 minutes while he was tinkering around getting the tractor ready, right? And then he goes, jump in. And I went, I get to ride it too. I thought I was going to walk right back up to the car and meet him there. He goes, jump in. And I jumped in, and we went for a tractor ride. back to my vehicle. It took us a while. Might have taken us about an hour, but we got my car out and turned around. He says, "You sure you don't want to come and stay the night with us? We'll make sure that we can follow you behind." And I said, "No." And he says, "It's so good that you decided to come and knock on the door again." He says, "Because I came through the back road." So there was a road behind his house, right? So maybe the road that I was on just kind of drove through his property, and then it just carried on. And I said, "No, I'm going to try and make it out tonight," right? He says, "Well," he says, I don't have a phone." He didn't even have a phone. He says, "I don't have a phone, but maybe I'll take a drive down that road tomorrow, and just to make sure that you're okay." And I says, "No, don't take a drive." I says, "It was only an hour. If it takes me a couple of hours," because I was driving slow down the road anyway. I says, "If it takes me a couple of hours, I've got my snow gear. I'm good. I will walk back here and let you know. And if I'm not back here, then I got out fine." And it took me, because it was dark, so I had to go a lot slower. And plus, I was super anxious by that point, because I got myself in a situation, because it was like minus 40 Celsius outside. It was actually turned out to be the coldest February day in record. And I knew, like, I remember that it was a February, it was the coldest February day on record. And I got back on the road. Finally, after about an hour and a half, I got back out onto the highway and made myself get to Brandon. Brandon is about a 4-hour drive on the highway from Winnipeg. And I grabbed myself a cup of coffee at the nearest Tim Hortons, and right by that time I was super grateful. I got out of there safe and sound. I could drive on the highway. It was a new vehicle that I had, but at that point I made the decision that I was never again going to go out on the highway in the winter again. And I kept my promise in that. I never went urban exploring after that in the winter. In the summertime, yes, but in the wintertime, I made that promise that even if I was with somebody, I was never going to get myself in that situation again. But that's only two stories. There are lots. There are lots of times that I've gotten myself stuck out somewheres. It's not the first time I had a tractor pull me out of a ditch. I had a gentleman from a Hutterite colony come out and help me one time pull my car out of the Dutch ditch when I got stuck out there. Um, Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine. Oh my goodness. When I went to Pinawa Dam, that video was up there. Yeah, I think you have seen that one, Tama, when I was at Pinawa Dam in the wintertime, and I got stuck there too. And I was stuck there for at least an hour and a half, because that was way out in the bush, right? And finally, I had no choice. I got a signal and I called the nearest town. And luckily, there was somebody in that town who was willing to come and get me. And about 20 minutes before he came, a family came to do a little bit of a winter walk on the trail. And because I had a little car, they managed to get me out of the snowbank and get me turned around. And then the gentleman who came missed his dinner and everything to come and save me, right? He didn't charge me or anything. He says, "I'm just glad that you got out of the snow," right? And yeah. Yeah, this is why I say all the time, how amazing the people are in Manitoba. It's because we do live in the extremes when it comes to the winters and the summers. Like we have very hot summers and we have very, very cold winters. And we depend on our neighbors, we depend on our community. And I think probably that's why we have a very high tolerance for each other. That, discrimination is not as prevalent as you might see in some of the other provinces or states. And it's because we rely for our very survival on each other because of those extremes. Yeah. Lots funny stories, right? They're like, now that you're out of them, and, when I'm 80 years old and sitting in my rocking chair and I look back on all my adventures, right? These are adventures that I have stories about, right? They're part of my story, and I get to utilize them because they're my experiences. I get to utilize them in, well, in like what I'm doing right here in telling these stories, right? I do love my adventures, but I do sometimes think I'm invisible. That idea when I come into my lives and I go da 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 da, right? That's the Superman cape, right? That's the Superman cape. That's that idea that maybe I'm invincible, that I've come to save the day, right? And it's not the truth in any way. It's only in my mentality, right? And because I've been doing it so long, it's part of that. What do you call that? Is it um it's there's a name for it. I can't remember what they call it, but it's part of my beginning of my lives. Every single life that I do, right? Yeah. Oh, you do remember that one. Yeah. That was scary, but I never went out. I never went out again in the wintertime because I recognized in that moment that it was pretty silly. I could even say it was probably pretty dumb that I was out there. But because I love urban exploring, and it was how I calm my system down. We all have coping mechanisms, to help relieve the stress of our hard days or our hard weeks or the screaming kids or the bills or the catastrophes and the illnesses and the responsibilities that we have in our life, right? And that's how we pick up addictions and stuff. But, it was one of my healthy addictions, I feel, because I recognized that when I was out on the road on my own, that my system did calm down. That, I felt like the world was mine. I felt like I was Superman, right? That nothing could get at me, that I was invincible. And it would calm my system down so that I could deal with whatever I had to deal with and deal with it in a healthy way, not in a way that cost me lots of money, because you guys know I used to gamble lots, right? And super grateful. Like, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful that I'm not, because I wouldn't be doing any of this, right? I wouldn't have had any of the money to be able to, pick up the equipment that I need or put the roof over my head or the groceries. But then again, maybe I would have, but I would have hurt myself emotionally and mentally because I wouldn't have learnt those lessons in codependency and projections and narcissism, and toxic people and toxic jobs. And I wouldn't have understood stress, and I wouldn't have understood the word ego and how we can talk ourselves into thinking that we're invincible or talk ourselves into thinking we're incapable, right? that we don't have anything to offer, or even worse, that we don't matter in any way. So I have to appreciate how the lessons get to me. But those lessons got to me, didn't they? And it's not like, well, I did choose them. I did choose them, but they came across my path in the most opportune moments. And maybe they consistently came across my path, right? More than that one time that I went, oh, are you kidding me? I didn't know that, right? Maybe it came across my path a dozen times, 20 times, 100 times. But that was the one time that it finally got through to me, right? So when we talk about failing, right, all the time, that it's the way we move, because we never catch it in the first lesson or the first attempt, the first try. Failing is so important in making any kind of movement. And we just have to appreciate and be grateful when those lessons come across our paths, that, right, in that moment, we can choose to delve into it a little bit deeper, to do the difficult thing, to say no to ourselves because we're taking care of ourselves, or say no to somebody else because we recognize that somebody else doesn't care for us, right? They're just utilizing us to make their own lives more comfortable, to make things easy, to make things run smoother. And, that's a human failing. It doesn't make that person a bad person in all truth. It really isn't. It's only when you take the last glass of water from somebody, the last crumb of food, when you throw somebody under the bus or feed them to the wolves, right? When you trying to crawl out of the bucket of crabs. This is I heard this terminology one time. It's so good. It's a bucket of crabs, right? And they're all trying to get out, but you're trying to get out too, right? And obviously, you can't help anybody get out of the bucket. You're trying to get out of the bucket, but you don't want to be crawling other people's heads, other crabs' heads, right? You don't want to take other crabs out in your attempt to save yourself, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, we are the most important beings, each one of us, right? Nobody is I hear this all the time. Nobody's coming to save you. And that's the truth, right? It is the truth. And I was always kind of offended whenever I heard that, because I was always brought up to feel that, if I needed something, I could ask my family, right? I might get cranked out for it. I might get in heck. I might get a lecture. I might be beholden to them in that kindness. But in the end, they would get what they needed in getting their frustrations out from the week. And I would get that help that I needed. Right? So I always depended on that help coming, because the help in the end always came. I have that saying that, everything is going to be okay. So the first time I heard this saying that nobody's coming to save you, I was offended by that, right? I don't want to stand on my own 2 feet if I can't depend on other people, right? But that was the way that I was brought up, right? To be dependent on my family for anything that I needed. right? Nobody else was going to help me. But in the end, I could depend that my family would help me, right? Like I said, I might get cranked out for it, right? But somebody always came to save me. But those were lessons that I learned a little bit later in my life when I started to understand about codependency. And, I never thought that I had codependency because I'm a very independent person, because I was always the worker bee. Somebody said, Cindy, do this. Cindy, get me this. I was always on it, right? And babysitting my sisters and just growing up too early. I thought I was very independent. But in my relationships, coming from a dynamic family, I had two parents in the opposite extremes, right? My father was also, I would have to say, codependent, because he was very codependent on my mother. My father was living his best life. He was a little bit irresponsible, but he was a kind, loving, wonderful father, and I became very codependent on my father for my very safety, right? And for that love that I didn't get anywheres else. Now, that was a lesson that, well, I guess I learned it fairly early because it was a big problem for me, because I had to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. And part of standing on your own 2 feet is to recognize that you can't be codependent. You have to be reliant on yourself. And even though I thought I was independent, I thought that I could do it all, I recognized that I depended on my family a great deal. They were the only ones that I could trust to get me out of the mess. And like I said, it was probably going to be painful to ask them, but it would have been a lot less painful asking them than involving somebody else outside of the family in getting those needs met. And of course, being the introvert that I was, that shy kid that I was, I would never have asked anybody for favors. I never did. I was taught, I was brought up not to ask, right? Not to ask. So even in asking my parents or my sisters or anybody, right, for help, I'd always say, I've got that. Give me that. I'm good. I got it, right? And so I learned to be independent, but at the same time, very codependent in those aspects of myself that I felt that I was very lacking in, right? I felt I was lacking in safety. So I was very codependent on my father, right? He didn't mind. He loved his kids, right? He loved his kids lots. And but I was like a little dog just holding on to his leg like constantly, because he was my safe zone. But also at the same time, he was that love and affection and caring and fun and adventurous. And those gifts were everything to me, because I didn't get those gifts in any other place, right? I didn't get those gifts in any other place. That was my source. That was my codependency. So that was a lesson I really had to learn. And after my father passed away, my sister Tracy became the matriarch of the family. She's a year and a half younger than me. But I was living my best life. I was my father's daughter, and I was living my life for the day. I wasn't living my life for the future. I didn't really think that I had a future. But when my father passed away, I transferred that codependency that I had with my father, I transferred it onto my sister Tracy to fulfill those needs that I had. But in learning about codependencies, that relationship got very strained. Now we're just starting to get back on track. But my sister got her butt kicked too, right? That she got her lessons, and it was in her choices whether or not to never give up or to give up, and she never gave up. She never woke up to any of these ideas that I did, right? And that's unfortunate. But right, in having that opportunity to build a new relationship with my sister, understanding she was part of that dynamic family too. She was golden child. That was a hard one. My mother had great expectations for my sister Tracy, right? She was going to be the matriarch of the family. That was a big responsibility in all aspects. She was meant to grow up, and she was programmed to take care of the family after my father passed away. And there I was, living my best life, grabbing down at the lifelines that were coming down to me on occasion to keep myself afloat. And I needed to learn to be independent. Needed to learn to make my own decisions. I had to be my own parent, and I had to pull myself away from those codependent relationships in order to learn that lesson. And it's been a few years, but I believe that we're moving closer into it's not the same kind of relationship. It's definitely changed in that, right? And she recognizes that, right? She does recognize that, and I recognize it in her too. But that doesn't mean that it can't be healed, right? As long as I'm not preaching at her. That's her idea. Sydney, stop preaching at me, right? And it's just I'm just a different person. She just sees me a little bit different because I am different. I am a different person than the person that I was. And she recognizes that, we can have these loving relationships, right? We can build on that relationship, but it's not going to be contractional. It's not going to be uh, um, you give me this and I'll give you that, right? So whatever we give to each other, it's going to come from the heart. And I think personally, right, that's a better way to go about it because then people really recognize that you really do care for them, right? I know for myself that I appreciate my sister, right? I miss the goodies because there were lots. My sister was very well to do, right? And even being irresponsible and being my father's daughter and living for the day, she made sure that my life was comfortable, right? And that's the truth. But I was living beyond my means. And if you guys have been hanging out with me for any length of time, you know that there hasn't been much means going on in my life. And it has been a challenge, but I'm doing it. I've done it. I've adapted, I've conquered, I've ridden the waves, right? I got back to work. I've been working on the mindset. I've been sunshining on everybody that's in my life, especially on myself, right? In being that example and evidence that it can be done. If somebody wants to put that work in, it's not comfortable. Like I said, it's scary when you lose relationships in your life, but you have to, because when you wake up to some of these ideas, you recognize that not all of your relationships, if any, were real, right? Because everybody wears a mask, interesting because I've been working on this word kindness, right? And they were saying that there are no good people. There are no good people, only those that will try, knowing that they will fail. And I thought about that and I went, oh my goodness, that's so true, right? In truth, we're all in it alone. It's wonderful if we have those cheerleaders and those people who will support us and those people who care for us, right? That's absolutely amazing. But that's right. That's a rarity in the world that we live in. It's kind of a free for all right now. But there are people, because when I first read that quote, I went, that's not true. I know so many amazing people. But the idea is yes, there's lots of amazing people, but people who are purely kind, right? We wouldn't survive, right? We wouldn't survive if we were pure kind because you know where kindness gets us sometimes, right? That kindness kind of makes us like doormats sometimes. You'll get utilized and abused and taken advantage of. And that's the truth in that. And, that could make us bitter and resentful. And we all wear masks just because we don't like agitation. We don't like to stir the pot. We're non confrontational. So, it's important for us to recognize just the fact that we're wearing a mask, right? Makes it so that we're not being good to ourselves. Because if we were really being good people, we would be genuine, wouldn't we? In the good and the bad, recognizing we're only human. I don't beat myself up in being a codependent. I don't, right? These are things that I grew up in. And even though I am a lot better, right? If somebody swooped in and said, Cindy, let me take that off your shoulders, right? Let me save the day. Those traits would pop to the surface. But at least now I would digest them and I would feel them out and I would make sure that there wasn't a contract. And I'm not saying like a written contract, but that expectation is like when you meet a boy and he takes you out for dinner, right? And then after dinner he wants to kiss you and wants to come home with you and right? And he feels that while he bought you dinner, that's the least that you can do, right? And so you have to be strong enough and you have to be that parent for yourself to make that decision. It's a choice, you can, right? But it has to be your choice. And for myself, I always take those 30 seconds at the very least, more if I can, but right? Take those few moments to see whether or not there is some kind of contract, if there is that expectation of something coming back in return in that. If it's a true kindness, if somebody has an outfit in their closet and it doesn't fit them anymore, and I say, Cindy, do you want this dress? Right? It's going to go to the Salvation Army or I'm going to throw it away. Sure. It's a beautiful dress. Thank you so much. Right? So those kind of things you don't even have to think about because it's a matter of nobody else is going to get use out of it, right? And they're not doing it because you're going to give them something out of your closet, right? Or they don't have any expectations that you're going to do their dishes or wash their car, right? That it's okay in doing that. But it has to be in our choices. And it's, for myself, lots of times when people do kindnesses for me, I find it really hard not to want to reciprocate, right? All those years that my sister was matriarch and she was helping me to stay afloat. I didn't have money to repair when she paid a bill for me, or she bought me some groceries, or put some gas in my car. But what I could do is I could clean her house, I could mow her grass, I could do her laundry, I could work in her garden, I could go to the grocery store for her, I could make dinner for her. And that was something in our relationship that had become contractional, right? When I say that little drummer girl, little drummer boy kind of attitude, how important it is, for us to recognize that there are kindnesses that we can do out in the world that don't cost money, right? But it's when we put ourselves in that situation where we feel that need to pay back. And sometimes it's important to allow people to do kindnesses for us because they get something out of it too, right? Whether it's that feeling of feeling needed, right? That they don't feel good about themselves. So in giving back in their own way, this is the way they like to give. So when we look at ourselves, we have to recognize, yes, truly, there are no good people, only those that will try, knowing that they will fail. And that's okay, right? That is okay. That's how kindness starts. And, you know, but if we recognize it, and that's the idea, most of the time we don't recognize it. We don't see whose head we're stepping on, right? Whose milk on their kids' cereal we're taking away because they're taking care of our needs and we're not taking care of our own needs. And that's codependency when you come to rely, or more importantly, when we come to expect others to take care of us, right? And that was something that I needed to learn. So yeah, that was something I think I learned pretty good, and it was painful, right? For sure, it was painful because it's easy when your needs are taken care of, but when your needs are taken care of, in truth, it makes you weak, right? Because you're not learning to take care of yourself. And that was something that I needed to do. Hello, Eugene. Okay, let's come back here. Um, you really had some adventures too, Cindy. I'm glad that you made it okay through it all. Yeah, I'm glad I made it through those some of those winter. Took me a few years. I was already a few years into my urban exploring, right? When I finally learned that lesson. Yeah, but sometimes you need to be knocked upside the head a few times before things sink in. Like I said, sometimes those coincidences and those breadcrumbs and those thoughts and those actions, they come across our path all the time, but we don't recognize them, right? Sometimes we fall into that same pothole lots of times, right? And then you don't want to get to the point where you get yourself in a really bad situation before it finally sinks in, right? You guys hear me talk about it all the time. You got to make those choices. You got to bring that change into your life, and you have to take action right away in those changes that you recognize that need to be done, right? No matter what that change is. But it doesn't mean to go 100 miles an hour. It's just a matter of getting that movement going, one foot in front of another, right? And giving yourself that 45-degree turn. Because if you don't make that turn, that 45-degree, that nice, smooth, wide turn that isn't too painful, you know what's coming. You know you're going to get a 360, right? And find yourself right at the very beginning in that disaster again. Or just as scary is a 180-degree turn, because the 180-degree turn takes you to the opposite end in a totally unfamiliar environment with totally new experiences. And the 180s and the 360s, yeah, if at all possible, I'm going to be done with those. But I know I'm only human. I make mistakes and make bad decisions all the time. And I'm going to get those yanks. I'm going to have those wrenches thrown into my engine, right? I'm going to have those moments where my blood pressure goes through the roof, right? But if I make that movement, if I make those good decisions, like getting the family doctor, right? Better late than never. I haven't had a doctor, oh my goodness, in a couple of decades anyway. I've just been using walking clinics because I haven't been sick. I've been in good health. But in going for a checkup, they found that didn't have much iron going on inside of me. So now I'm on the iron pills, but I made that movement. I made that choice to get a new doctor. Again, it could have been sooner, but again, like I said, those cues, those things that happen in your life, you go, maybe I should go see a doctor, right? Maybe it's time to get a checkup, right? And you just go, okay. And then you go back to the couch and the remote control or YouTube or video games or living your best life until something comes up and it is disastrous. And then you go, oh my goodness, I'm anemic. How do we get this under control? Right? You go into a little bit of frenzy in that. But in the end, I made that choice, right? And again, it was in those serendipities and coincidences and breadcrumbs that come into my life, right? I was just out for a walk and I came across a new medical clinic in a high rise that they just built. And I went, oh, maybe I'll go in there and see if I can get an appointment, see if they're taking new patients and time to get a checkup. And I went in there, filled up my forms, handed it in. He says, oh, do you have time to see a doctor now? I went, oh, I'm just out on a walk. Yeah, sure. Let's see a doctor. And next thing you know, I've got sheets of blood tests and mammograms and iron pill prescriptions, and she's right on top of it. But that was only because I made that decision. When the thought came to my mind, I walked by that place, thought came to me, and I said, okay, let's just do this action. Let's just take this 45-degree turn so I don't get yanked, so I don't get that 360 or that 180-degree turn and find out that I've got something serious going on, right? And that's what life does to you. If you don't make that movement and something needs to be done and you're not recognizing all those clues, all those experiences and conversations and serendipities and breadcrumbs that come across your path and you're not recognizing those, that's when your life is going to get the wrench, right? That's when that pebble is going to get thrown into the engine and you're going to find yourself in a situation. And I would much rather do a 45-degree turn, put one foot in front of another, right? That action, the moment the thought comes to me, then have my life turned upside down on me. And that's the truth, right? That's the truth. Okay, you guys, let's grab the cards. I love your introduction to your What's My Good Cheer. Aw, thank you, Tammy. I do it every time. I know I have 5 seconds to catch somebody's attention, but I'm also hoping that in those 5 seconds that people can pick up on my energy, because that's what I want to flow in my podcasts and in my lives, is And in my videos is that energy, right? And, I grew up a shiner, right? And it is in my own little drummer girl, little drummer boy idea where, you think, well, what can I give? What do I have to offer, right? I can offer this, right? And it might not seem like much to some people, but maybe to one person, it's everything, right? Maybe somebody tomorrow will make appointment to go for a medical checkup because this came across their path. And that's the idea, right? But I thank you for saying that, Tammy. And hello to you, Eugene. I say, Cindy, keep urban exploring when you can, whether it's local or near, or when you go for a ride or drive. You can go farther or far. Your urban exploring makes your channel too. I love exploring the outdoors. It's part of me, right? It's part of me. And, it's in that adapt and conquer. It is in riding the waves. And it's believing, right? It's believing that that's what's going to come into my life because it's such a part of my life, right? My insides love Mother Nature as much as I love Mother Nature. It's one of those commonalities that I have for myself. So I'm optimistic, I'm positive, right? That I have faith that it's going to carry on. It's going to carry on that way. Lots of adventures left inside of me. I remember, Cindy, when you were talking about those influential people that you want to dive in and read and study them, etc. That could be your exploring in history of famous and influential people. Well, that's my mindset, Tammy, right? I love the thought leadership. Part of my inspiration and part of my dreams and goals is get to the point where, that I can be on the road. Now I'm exploring the inside and the outside, but there's no reason I can't explore the inside while I'm outside, while I'm walking the trails, while I'm sitting along a beautiful landscape, a beautiful sunset over a lake, or sitting at a campfire, right? But also, it's in my physicality. And because I love mindset, because, I'm part of that, I have that entrepreneurial, right? I would have given up a long time ago if I didn't have it in me that I've done workshops and seminars, and I love being around people who love mindset, right? And so I would love to include that as part of working with the inside too, is to go to workshops and seminars, right? To actually be able to sit in an audience of great thought leaders out there, knowing that it's my physicality, right? That shines. And if I could rub well in that physical aspect of myself, that's amazing, right? I'm happy in the moment. It's with the few people that I associate in this building, the few friends that I have in my sisters' lives that I can shine on them, right? And then also come in here 6 days a week, 5 days with What's My Good Cheer. And then I have my Sunday live show, right? That I do in Chatters Live, that I shine there too. But I do understand, right? I could shine a whole lot better in that physical aspect of myself. But that's all coming. I have faith. That's tied in with that stick with the bag at the end, my goals, my dreams, those things that I'm moving forward, that aspect of myself that's supposed to be the example and the evidence to others that it can be done. And that's the truth. Yeah. Thank you, Tammy. You have great insights. I love your insights. Um, I have a mint green t-shirt that says kindness matters, and I wear it quite often. I get comments sometimes, and people who know me personally know that I am kind, and they like it when I wear it. That's beautiful. I love that. I love that, Tammy. And I hope they're just as kind to you as you are to them. I have a coffee mug that says kindness matters. And kindness was my one word for a couple of years for sure. I think, where I'm sitting right now, it's definitely choices, right? Because none of this would have happened without the choices that I made in my own life. Choices have made such an impact in my life that I would love to get that message out to others on how important choices are, right, in our movement. It is really, really important. But each one of us gets to make those choices for ourselves. And it's only through the example, right, and the evidence of the people that we come across and the adventures that we come across in our lives that bring about these opportunities to make a choice. Okay. We all make mistakes, Cindy, and we can make bad or wrong choices sometimes. 100%. I surely am not perfect. I've made mistakes and bad choices, but we keep going onward and forward. I couldn't have said that better, Tammy. That was perfect, right? You just put one step in front of another, expecting that you're going to fail. Don't dwell on it, right? But expect it. So that when you do fail, you can just get up, dust your knees off, and take another step. Or laugh at yourself, right? Laugh at yourself. Make it light. Oh, that's silly, Cindy. Did it again, right? You grab my attention, Cindy. I love it. I never change that intro there. I won't. I've been doing it for so long now. Okay, you guys. Let's grab a card. If you've never hung out with me before, this is a deck that I put together. It's not tarot cards, they're just powerful words, but they're not just powerful words. They are powerful words, right? Sometimes the word that I pull is pertinent to the conversation. Sometimes we go off in a different direction for a couple of minutes. But I appreciate that you guys hang out with me to this point to see what the card is. Even though you let me go 15 minutes into the conversation of the podcast because I haven't gotten to the point yet. I appreciate it. Oh my goodness, what were we talking about? Believe, right, is the word that we have today. What we believe dictates our movement, right? It does. When those serendipities, those breadcrumbs, those conversations, those mishaps and missteps, right? Those adventures that come into our life, they come across our path, they beat us up on the side of the head. It might happen 100 times before you notice, right? But when you notice, you have to make a choice. And when you make that choice, you have to put some kind of action towards it immediately, right? Because it's all about the movement. It's all about that 45-degree turn because we know if it's been coming across your path, right? If you've been saying, oh my goodness, I should go to the doctor, then you put it off, right? I should go to the dentist, you put it off, right? I should go buy that dress, then you put it off, right? And it keeps coming to your mind. And then on the hundredth time, right, it finally smokes you. And it smokes you, and you find yourself in a ditch at 40 below zero, right? Then you know You finally get it through. Okay, Cindy, right? We're not going to be doing that anymore. And in making that choice, maybe it was the next time you were going to go out and it was 40 below zero and you didn't have any help, that there was nobody coming to save you, that you truly were all on your own. And if you were all on your own at 40 below zero, I hope you had a pair of good snow pants to keep you warm, right? Till help finally came. Yeah, that's true. You have to put that movement in, right? And it's the believe, right? Yeah. What we believe dictates our movement. And that's the truth, right? If you think you're going to be safe out on the road at 40 below zero, right? That's what you're going to believe. And that's going to dictate your movement. You're going to end up in a ditch. I could have been in big doo doo that day. Like, it was scary. I was in a scary situation. It could have easily been a different story in that. But I should have known long before then that I shouldn't have been out on the road by myself in the middle of winter, driving down those little. It was a driveway, right? It was an hour-long drive on somebody's driveway to their farm, and it could have easily have been a different story. But that was something, someone, some breadcrumb, right? That message kept coming across my path, but I kept saying, da 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 da. I got this. Nothing can take me down, right? Until it takes you down in a bad way, right? But if you had made that movement, that decision, right? What we believe dictates our movement. If we had paid attention, if we had made that 45-degree on turn on our own, that maybe that 360 or that 180-degree turn doesn't have to happen in our lives. That's the truth. And I think if any one of us looks back at our lives at some of those decisions that we knew we should have taken, that conversation that we got, but we decided, we got this, that won't happen to me, right? And then it happens to us. Then we believe something a little bit different. And when we believe something a little bit different, we can make a choice. We have to make a choice, right? A choice in something different, right? And that's going to dictate how we move. Okay, you guys, that's all I've got for you tonight in the heat stroke. Not quite that. For the most part of the day, I did sit in front of the air conditioner and appreciated it, sending some gratefuls to the air conditioner. Hope it gets by for the rest of the summer, right? Putting that out there now in my little bit of movement. I still have belief in my air conditioner, right? But it's on my mind. If there's an opportunity to pick something up inexpensive along the way, maybe it's time to do that. Put it off to the side so when I do have that little catastrophe, I'm ready just to plug in the new one. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. And we'll see you tomorrow. Everybody, have a great day.